real will maybe be walking slightly uphill or level to the boat, even though the rest of the pier is covered in water. Is that correct?
This part should be dry.
Right, no, I mean,
Here
this
is
part.
And it might be, yeah, it might be covered in water, and that was sort of a compromise plan because
Yeah, cost.
it's quite expensive to elevate that. It's mostly used by the fishermen. We are gonna elevate a pedestrian walkway down to there. So it is kind of a cost-effective solution,
Okay.
given that we're coming from here. I mean, in the best of all worlds, we would elevate it all, but that's probably another $2 million in that ballpark. But why they only did the drilling there and not here, nobody can really answer that question. We found a lot of the old borings from the 40s, 50s, but nobody had done it through the pier.
Do we have any concerns about the pier extension dealing with weather events that it never had to deal with before in terms of the amount of water that's going up and over? Are we more subject to roads and losing the tarmac there?
Well, it won't be good for the roads. They did a stability analysis back in 2022 and felt that there was enough stability, strength and stability to maintain that under, proposed, upcoming storm conditions. I think what we're sort of looking at is that we're not gonna invest a lot of money in that. And so there was one area on the west side where the boat ties up, that they were concerned about a bulge in the wall. And I'd say 2 out of the 3 assessments have been that that's mostly related to the boat and the boat tying up and kind of pulling away there rather than kind of any kind of structural instability due to weather or storm or wave run up. So the other compromise we're making, even with the whole program design, is in a very severe, sort of a January 24 storm going forward, we might not be able to access the boat, but we're probably not gonna be accessing the
Right, I want
boat.
it.
So we're not building for the absolute worst case scenario.
And I'm going off memory here, but I believe we also had the stability done right after the 24 storm to determine that what was done in that 2021 and 24 was,
There was no-
still similar, and there was no big changes as a result of that storm.
So we did a study before and then they put in little probes that we could measure and they had not shifted. They had one. I mean, I think we really saw no incremental damage, and it's that kind of structure is pretty solid. I will say the one thing I did so 2 things I wanted to point out to you about this is a lump sum fixed price contract, which is not always the way they would do it for an engineering study. I think they take a little risk, we take a little risk. In other words, they might have to do more than what they expected and they still have to do it for the amount. Same for us. They might do a little less, but I think given the urgency of getting this done for the design, I'm fine with that. They convinced me today when I talked to them. The other thing is I did ask them to just amend this contract and add that, the expectation is they'll complete the work by the end of May.
Oh.
And, they can't guarantee it, but I kind of wanted to be sure that was what the plan was, because there was not much in here about, there was how long it would take, but not about when it was gonna happen. Then they also confirmed that, they might need a little bit of help from Public Works getting set up, but then they're gonna be self-sufficient. They don't need traffic control, they just need some traffic cones, but they don't need anything in terms of our Public Works staff while they're working. But they will be working in those areas, and so parking won't be available, and they said they should be done in less than a week.
Will Public Works be helping with the tilings that gets pulled out of the boreholes? Because
No.
that's gonna accumulate, so they weren't taking it away.
No, I think that we didn't, I think we'll, at least not.
I mean, I don't know how much material that is, but they did make a point of saying that they're not going to take it away.
It's 4 borings, drive and wash, 4.5 inch, 3 to 4 inch borings. So I think what we normally do is put it in like a drum or a container, and they could contain it, and then it could be removed.
Okay, so it's really small amounts.
It's not a big amount of material. David?
Are we ready for a motion?
Yeah, probably. Does anybody else have any more questions? I guess before we go through a motion, I do want to check and see if the public has any questions. I do have the big question. So Vika, I had asked Vika to tell us, so this is the 30% design portion of the Stone Pier project. We received a grant from the main main DOT it's a 50-50 match, so we got 75, up to 75,000, assuming we match it by up to 75. So we have sort of available through this grant, $150,000, of which half of which is matched. And so I did ask Vika to tell us where we are on that. And then because we do have to determine where we're gonna get the money for this.
Right.
So the 30% design that we're currently working with GI on, that contract was for 89,900. So this should realistically be able to be added to that cost. And it would, like Carol said, it is a 50-50. To date, we've spent about a little over $30,000. So the full 89 hasn't been expended, but the good news that there will realistically be about a $60,000 difference from the grant and from the GEI work currently. So this particular cost, about $5,000 in addition. So the 30% design and this all in total will cost the town about $80,000. And 75 of it will be covered by the grant.
So, and the money will come out of the Stone Wharf Reserve.
And so right now there is a motion in there to allocate for all of the funds to come out of it. The funds will be reimbursed once we get the grant is on a reimbursement basis, so I do need the authority to be able to pull the money from that reserve account. But then when we receive the reimbursement, that account will be back increased by $75,000. And this is another of those small clerical changes that we're doing, whereas before we didn't, if we knew that there was a grant or matching, we didn't always expend it out of that reserve account. We kind of just put it into our general ledger, pulled it out of the checking account. But this new process is more transparent, but it does require a little bit more moving. So the initial costs do come out of the reserve account.
Okay, so any more questions from the board on the GEI proposal, the geotech? Any questions from the public? All right, so there is a suggested motion at the end of that. Do you have that, David?
Yes, move to authorize the town administrator to sign the GEI consultant's proposal for geotechnical explorations at the Stone Wharf in the amount of $65,000 to be paid out of the Stone Wharf Reserve account number 9015.
Have a second on that?
Second.
Gerhard, all in favor? Great.
Was that?
Thanks, because that was clear and easy to follow.
We can put the waste in little jars.
And you'll follow up with that.
Friendly.
Yeah. So next on the agenda is 2625. So this is the discussion about and possible decision regarding the updated Waldo Point right-of-way stabilization proposal, including the homeowners offer to fully fund all design, permitting, construction costs and their May 26th deadline for town authorization. And then Vika provided, I wasn't really clear, you have two memos.
Yeah, there's two memos, and I was kind of hoping you would get confused by it. So there is one memo in it was updated based on the applicant communication from February 27. But then what I did is I provided a memo with a really detailed summary of the last conversation that the select board had when Mike Morse was present.
Yeah.
Where the select board really didn't say no, but they said that there is additional information that really has to be done before they can agree. After that communication, after that decision, we did receive a communication that the applicants went ahead to, and they're gonna apply for permits independently without the town. And then We did receive this week notice in the mail that those applications were gonna be submitted and copies will be at the town office. We have not received that information. When we do, we'll distribute it. So they have applied with the state. What they also did, and the second memo kind of details and outlines that, is they basically, in my understanding, is opened the discussion to the select board to and put a time limit on it to decide by May 1 whether you're going to proceed with working them or not. And so what I want to make sure that the board understands is this particular recommendation does not clarify any of the questions you had. What it's doing is it's putting you in a time crunch to decide and make your decision within the next couple of weeks. And so in the memo towards the end, I kind of provided what your options are and where, you know, where ultimately you want to go with this. And also keeping in mind that you did have a lot of questions that you raised, so we would be in a position of wanting to have those questions answered before making the decision by May 1st, which really gives us a couple of weeks to figure all that out. So that's a decision for you.
Well, I appreciate you recapping the prior conversations and sort of the issues at hand. And what's pretty clear, really, there is not a lot in the way of choices, given I don't think anybody here would think, correct me if I'm wrong, May 1 is a reasonable date to get those questions answered. That looks like they might actually still have some expense to the town, but regardless of that, I just don't see that. Based on the information we still need, that we could get that to happen that quickly.
I think it would be difficult, and I would agree with that. I think the other thing is sort of to the letter C here. You know, is this something the town really needs? And I did have, ask the geologists at the Maine Geological Survey to review it and to independently. And they came back with the same comment that GEI made, which was, I thought, interesting, that there is kind of this rock ledge out in front of the right of way that provides quite a bit of protection. And actually, looking at it on an aerial photo, you can see how the wave refraction sort of causes the erosion on those two properties. But actually, our right of way is fairly protected. So, you know, they didn't pass judgment on do this, don't do this. The other part that I have a problem with still from day one is we have like this hand-drawing thing of what, you know, I don't feel like we have enough information on what the design is.
Right.
And I think if they really, yeah, I'm surprised. I thought we might get a plan where it really showed the project, but that to me makes it difficult to expend money when I feel like we don't really know what it is they're proposing. Yep.
Also, the way I see it for making the decision is, number one, to make sure we're not jeopardizing our FEMA funds. To me,
Right.
that is so critical, such a big piece for this community. But the second is I did receive an email from someone. Did we all receive it? So making sure that we can assure that there is good, safe pedestrian access, which is important for that spot. And it appears to me, is that within the scope of the FEMA funds?
So that's, yeah, so that is an area that the town needs to address.
Yep.
And there is some FEMA money to cover putting it back to pre-storm condition and adding the steps back in. What it doesn't involve is the level of the detail of stabilization that the abutting property owners on either side are doing. And so I think an important factor for this board to consider, and I guess before saying that, the reason that I haven't brought this proposal to you is because right now the primary focus is on Stone Pier and South Shore Drive, because they're far bigger, more significant. Out of the $1 million, little over $1 million that we've received, nearly most of that was for South Shore Drive, so priority wise, that's far bigger. Once we get further down the road with that, and we have contacted GEI about kind of the next list of things, which is East Shore Drive, and then the culvert work here, and then the culvert work down at Bennett's. So in my personal opinion, is there are several other projects that are far more important for the general entirety of the community than a handful. I believe there's 5 in total, which short access areas that were damaged that will need to be addressed. They just have not made to you because they haven't been perceived as that significant priority. And so I think if you want to move forward with the May 1 timeframe, what we would have to do is we would have to kind of rework some of these priorities and likely have somebody like GEI pause something that they're already working on and revisit this. And so I think that's an important thing to take into consideration is if you do want to move forward and work with this, with this proposal, where do you want to put this project on a priority in terms of what is already happening? But yes, it is going to need to be addressed because we do have FEMA money, just not to the same level.
So what I would like to express my opinion on is with great apologies, I think that continuing discussions to try to get this done by May 1st doesn't seem feasible. Also, the fact that several times now we've indicated that the drawings prepared are not adequate enough and we still haven't received that, which concerns me. And I just want to be assured that in the future, we maintain it as a priority for safe public access, which can be done safely with stairs, that we would maintain that commitment to the public. But I would be.
And relative to public access, Brent, that is one of her projects that she is working on, and we had just recently received a grant from Island Institute. Part of that grant covers signage and things really making it clear what that public access is. So work for public access and safe and known is an active project that this town is working on.
Okay, so my statement.
Okay, David, what's your thoughts on this?
Agree with what, I think this is premature at this point,
Okay.
one way to put it.
Yeah, we need more, more drawings and more details.
Yeah.
At this point, we can't get it done.
Yeah, I think the timing is difficult. I also think just to remember, they came first with, a $20,000 offer, which we decided that we did not want to pursue. And then came back with this second offer for full payment. I do think one of my concerns relative to the community member that was concerned about public access is this is about a 7 or 8 foot elevation of riprap and a 2-on-1 slope. And I do think that would be hard to navigate. Even with, you'd have to have stairs and you'd have to anchor them. I'm not sure what would be involved in that. So
Stairs were there before that got washed away, so that is within FEMA's cost of,
but I mean, the wall that they're proposing to build is quite different than what is currently there and necessary for stairs. It would require a much larger structure, a steeper slope, that kind of thing.
But I think it is important to recognize the investment of the owners in that area, their willingness to make something happen.
Yeah,
and to
I agree.
recognize that public spirit and not to just put them down.
No, and I do think what we should try to do, because I do think there's gonna be sort of competing needs to try to minimize erosion in the town right of way,
Yeah.
but still protect their properties. And my suggestion is we politely say, no, we're not interested, but we are willing to work with you through the process of,
keep the dialogue going.
keeping, because I do think it's gonna require cooperation on the project
Yeah.
approval. And it's really difficult without knowing what they're thinking of doing. This is not enough, but I think it's gonna be a little bit of a back and forth, and I don't know how the permitting agencies will look at that, so. Anyway, I think we don't need to spend more time on that, but I think, yeah, this is a difficult one in a
Do
way.
we need to move a decision then?
Do we need a decision, like a motion, or is it?
I don't believe that a motion is needed. My understanding is there is a consensus between all of you that, you don't feel like their request for May 1 is, adequate, and that, to let them know that, no, thank you, you're not gonna proceed with this, but to, make a point to state that, that there is an interest to make sure that there's communication in the future when it comes to, having collaboration and, the projects sync well enough that one doesn't destroy the other.
Right, so I think we'll try to work with them to achieve both our combined objectives. Yeah, all right. But moving on to 26, to review the harbor master job description, the coastal waters recommendations relative to the position, to have the board take action on the proposed job description and recommended hours. And so again, there was a memo with this, and also minutes from the coastal waters meeting, and then the harbor master job description, which is actually circa 2023, and the recommended hours. And so, Vika, is there anything you want to add to what you've had in your memo? I thought it was pretty self-explanatory, but.
Nope. I guess the only thing worth adding is I had sat down with the current harbor master and let him know that I was gonna be making this proposal, so it didn't come to a surprise to him. Prior to it going to coastal waters. After I went to coastal waters, I did reach out and let him know that it was coming in front of the select board. I did communicate with the superintendent about it as well, and I did get communication from the harbor master that he's interested in making this work, but that's more of a personnel issue that I think is gonna have to be resolved, depending on what the select board chooses to do.
So it sounds like you're saying there's possibility of the current individuals not interested in the extra hours.
The current individual is interested in making, in maintaining the position and making it work. The challenge is, and I wanted to be very clear that what I was bringing to the board was based on the needs of the municipality, not personnel issues. The kind of the behind the scene, is the current employee in the harbor master position, if this were to be back to what it was and is based on the job description, they wouldn't be able to have this position and keep the current hours with the employment that they have with the school, because both of those departments under the same umbrella tax wise, and it cannot exceed 40 hours. So and the town worked with that individual to decrease the harbor master hours when that position the school was taking. And so for the transparency reasons, to make it clear that it's not personnel related, I'm asking the coastal waters and the select board to review this, because I believe that we need the hours back. And that would put that individual in a position of having to make a decision.
And maybe you could sort of, I think a major addition is, or maybe it's not really an addition, it's always been in there, but we are asking the harbor master to manage the marine infrastructure.
That's something that I strongly think is a necessity. It describes a lot of that within the job description with the limited hours. A lot of that has been put on Public Works. We have a limited Public Works department with their own demands and needs. The town does now have a contractor that pulls the floats in and out, but there is a lot of communication revolved around that. Coastal Waters has been doing a lot of work and a lot of communication. And so if there is a harbor master position and those hours allow, what I would like to do and hope the board supports it is move the contracted services, change the harbor master department to marine infrastructure, have the harbor master salary and duties underneath that, move the contracted service out of public works for marine infrastructure into the harbor master, and have that position be the position that oversees the floats coming in and out, have that position be the one that communicates with, when the floats are being delivered, installed, and have that position take on more of the marine infrastructure communication and oversight that is being split between myself and public works at the moment.
So would that be an overall budget neutral movement of this position from?
It's, yeah, with the contracted service, right now, the budget is in public works, it would move to the harbor master. If that department would be perceived as it's having a significant increase. But it's because that money would be moving from one department into the next, not having had that money in that department. But I personally think that that's where that needs to be, all marine stuff kind of together, not scattered like it is now.
I think that might help us to really understand the cost of marine infrastructure maintenance, because coastal waters has been good about getting grants for replacing the floats, but sort of tracking all those costs together, which includes taking them in and out, would make sense, so that when we set our fees for tie-ups and transient, then we're at least dealing with the actual costs that are incurred. So we'll have a better metric, I think.
It's good.
So, any more questions from the board on the recommendation to resume, I guess, really the harbor master job description?
David has one.
Hours.
Yeah, my question is simply, what's the process gonna be to make some of the suggested changes that Deke is putting forward? What's gonna happen? What do we need to do?
So if the board is on board with supporting the recommendation, the next step is I will talk to the current harbor master. This will be implemented effective July 1, because there's we don't have it in the budget now to increase those hours. This is in line with what's being proposed in the budget for increase in the hours. And then the first change you will see will be next week at the department discussion, where you will see the change of the harbor master department being changed to marine infrastructure, and having the contracted service of the float be removed from public works and moved into harbor master marine infrastructure. So that those are kind of the steps.
So it would happen pretty quickly.
With the exception of the physical hours worked increased won't take place until July due to the funds.
And I assume some handoff from Public Works in terms of the nuts and bolts of the things they've been doing, turning that over to the harbor master, whoever that may be.
Yeah.
And so sort of an in-service and transition period.
Yep.
First off, I think this is in recognition of all the work that has been carried for marine infrastructure by coastal waters. I think it's
Coastal waters and public works
And
have
public works.
definitely taken on a lot, yes.
on the anticipated work hours. It's indeed on weekends.
So the way that the position, when it was worked, that recommended hours, majority of the hours were Thursday through Sunday, recognizing that that's the busiest time of the week for this community. But it was staggered throughout the week. There were, a couple hours here and there every day.
Okay. Good, thank you.
Any more questions from the board on the harbor master position? Public?
No, I don't think so. The only thing I would say is that it is a difficult position to fill.
Yeah.
When you look at the distribution of the hours, it's a difficult position to share with another community because it's seasonal and the busy season's busy for everybody. So it is a hard position to fill, which was really why the hours went down the first time. Is to make it work, and so we didn't have to go out and try to find somebody who could do the whole thing. So it's there is some risk in requiring all of this, and that's between the administrator and her employees, how that all works out. But there is risk. There's risk that.
Do I
position will not
understand
be
that
filled.
Coastal Waters was on board with the hours as they're specified in the job description?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
so
we
they
went through
feel
that.
like that's what the job needs.
Yeah, yes, we went through that list and said that everything on there was necessary.
And is it accurate to say, because we've made adjustments, that not all of those things are being done now? You know, in other words, all the job description as written is not what's happening at the moment, because we've accommodated an hourly reduction.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
Well, the other, I'm just a thought that we could consider having an assistant harbor master to split up the hours some. That would keep the individual as, you know, the position currently there, but, you know, especially with weekends and people have families or whatever, there might be some benefit in considering, you know, having, you know, part-time positions, you know, a primary person and a secondary person. This is a matter, just a thought. I mean, it's not something we have to decide today, but that
I
would
think
help.
if the board is supportive of this, then the first thing I'll do is talk to the current employee in the position and see whether, I mean, it's been expressed that the interest is there to make it work. But there's gonna be an expectation, I think, with a position that didn't exist before. And so whether that is possible, that's a discussion to be had. And I think if it's not possible, then yes, the town might be faced in the position of having to look to fill the position. But I think, and it's a challenging thing for me to bring to you, knowing that is a possibility. But I'm trying my best to look at what the needs of the job is and how to properly and fairly distribute it within that job description and not have it be picked up by other departments. So that's ultimately why, instead of just kind of, you know, proposing this to you through the budget process and being transparent that the current job description is reflective to what I'm asking you to support. I wanted to be transparent that, make it clear that it's, you know, the need of the position is there and is, if anything, is greater than, it has been before. And I think really the demand, in my opinion, is gonna increase when we start work around the Stone Pier and when, you know, implementing, some of those changes that are kind of coming in the near future.
Good move.
One question I have that, and now it sort of comes back to me, and I think it sort of came up with our former CEO position. These are hourly positions and people are paid for hours worked, not a stipend per week or month. Is that, so in other words, if somebody works 30 hours one week and 27 the next week, they're paid for those actual hours?
Correct.
Okay. And yeah, so that was my only question. So I guess we need a motion from the board in this case if we want, and I don't know, so I think what we're asking is the board to make a motion to approve the harbor master position and which has an attachment of the recommended hours of 23 hours a week on average. And I think, this was already in place, we're just reaffirming that that's what we want.
And do we need to include any information about the shellfish?
Not,
with
not
this?
here.
No, no, if you make a motion, I would just recommend saying to approve. And then instead of to review, to approve the, and then just read the agenda item.
Okay, good, ready?
Yep, ready.
Motion 26026 to approve the harbor master job description and the coastal waters commission recommendations relative to the position. And to,
Approve the recommended hours of.
Yeah.
23 average hours a week.
And job description.
Yeah, job, she said that.
okay. Second. Who said second? Thank
Second
you.
from Richard. All in favor? Okay.
Good work, coastal waters.
26, 27, so this is to discuss coordinating a joint meeting with Long Island to consider potential shared services, mutual challenges, and determine a suitable date for the meeting. So when we did our select board, I did send a little brief email to you guys, just because I meant to put a memo in the packet and I forgot, or didn't get to it. So we had in the fall talked about the benefit of maybe getting together with Long Island and seeing where we could, we help each other sort of mutually. I have had a couple conversations, one with their chair of the select board, John Burke, and also with Janice Avignon, who I work with a lot. She manages the GP Cog Fellow and we've had a number of projects that have overlapped. And so there is a fair amount of interest on Long Island. I will say it's almost like hearing the same words come out of people's mouths about different problems, and like the fire department per diem, and then housing, and then, well, we have people on the island, why can't we just pay them? It's exactly the same conversation. So, and their fire house is worse than ours too, I would say. But, and they have a really significant challenge right now, which I think they're down to 1 or 2 students in the school for next year. And so there's kind of a big debate, and their town meeting is coming up in a month, and the question will be, will they fund the school? So it's worse than us in terms of kind of where they're at. But, and for example, we might be sharing law enforcement, and they did approach us, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago about the law enforcement issue. I think there are maybe large, more issues, but at the same time, we can't kind of handle everything. So I think the meeting we were thinking might highlight the 4 or 5 top items that we might want to discuss and have some people there, but not like the whole community. But at the same time, the previous meeting that Vika and I had it was just the select board member and the 2 town administrators. And that was kind of a narrow discussion. But I think broadening a little bit and sort of having representation from some different groups would be worthwhile. But before we go forward with planning, I wanted to get a read from the select board on what you think, whether you think that's useful, what you think about the format, and then kind of the potential timing for a meeting.
Good. Ready to go. I think that I've been hearing about issues on Long Island, and I hear about them through EMS and through things that we do in common. And I think that it's time to be working together. I see lots of opportunities there. But I'd like to be more familiar with what Long Island looks like. And so I'm just not as familiar. I've had the tour and sailed around it, but I think that getting some boots on the ground and meeting together would be really helpful. And would we head over there?
I think we were thinking of meeting in Portland, so that I think there are a couple of things that I put in the memo. The group that I've discussed it with, think meeting in person is best. Zoom would be easy, but meeting in person is better. Trying to meet in Portland, we've done this before with them for a variety of reasons, is sort of the easiest, because we're both going to someplace we can get to. Whereas going inner island is not that simple, having done it with Prolong quite a bit. It's easier to go to Portland and go out than it is to go from Sheboygan most of the time in terms of timing and everything. So that's what they're suggesting is because we've done it in the past, we've met in Portland. So that's one thing is where, then I think we were thinking during the day, I just don't know that we could, the logistics of trying to meet at night and everybody trying to get back and forth to the island. So they were suggesting during the day and perhaps a weekday. And the kind of the bracket that at least we discussed the other day was their town meeting's the 9th. They can meet before then, and our town meeting is June 6th. I think starting to move into June really gets hard to get people together.
Yeah.
So, we could, and I think the next step would be if we're interested in this, then we may have our town administrator talk to their town administrator and try to work out some dates. But if you have thoughts on the format or timing and, there's both towns have a finance committee, so if, you guys wanted to meet with the finance reps. And it might not be like a whole committee shows up, but it might be, we have representatives for each topical thing. We kind of had a bigger thing in mind when we started talking about this in terms of getting a really big sort of summit together, but I think trying to start small and we can always get bigger. But I want to be able to pull it off, and given the urgent the expectation that we might be sharing a sheriff, and I think the next thing or the most urgent thing on the list is the public safety EMS in particular. We both have similar issues and, at least working together to solve those problems might be worthwhile. So from their standpoint, they felt their fire chief EMS guy should, so Will Turney should be there. And I think we would want somebody from fire department, if it isn't Ralph, would be somebody to represent at least EMS. So.
And Carol, David, we had a meeting back with Broadband One in the Casco Bay.
Yeah,
Or some kind of, yeah.
so I suggested that, I had a meeting there, but they said the last time they tried to meet there, Casco Bay Lines was, I think the relationship is a little frostier now because between the islands and Casco Bay Lines, and there's like some fare increases that are being proposed, so we can try that. I think it's the most convenient, but if that doesn't work, we can go to the GP Cog building, which is empty and it's available. And we could get our fellows, both island fellows who know each other and are working together, because we have a joint wildfire project that we're all working on, so they could help kind of or do all the logistics. And I don't think, it's a requirement that all the select board members go. I mean, it would be open to all the select board members, but if you can't make it, it's not a crisis. I think it's to get people together that want to talk about some of these things. And some of those folks are the people who, really helped us when we seceded. And Mark Green, who's closing in on 80, he's probably in his late 70s, he's getting tired, he said, and that's kind of what you hear around here too, right? And so who's gonna step into our shoes in the future is another there's some big sort of existential questions, but we kind of want to start with some of the nitty-gritty day-to-day things. But if it's of interest, I think we can have Vika and Brian Dudley, their town administrator, try to find some time. What do you guys think?
Sounds good.
I think it's a great idea. I think anything that bring the islands together for common resources, assets.
And one thing I did convey to them, and I hope I'm not stepping out of bounds here, is that, I was talking with their select board chair and he was saying like, yeah, there may be some places to save money and stuff. And I said, for us, it goes beyond just money. And if there's things we can do to help sustain your community, because I think they're even more under the gun than we are, we could try to do that. One thing he asked me about is, could we send our students to Shabbat?
Yeah.
And what would you charge us? And with me, I wouldn't charge them anything, honestly. But I think that's not for us to answer. That's the school committee. But that was the kind of questions he was asking. But I think they were having gone through that whole process, they were invaluable to us in the past, and they've been really, generous with their time. So, and also there is, just so you know, this new group at the state, the Maine Office of Community Affairs, is very much encouraging towns to collaborate. And they are providing resources to help that. And so there might be some advantages even, I mean, in some ways, there could be some shares even kind of, audit services or there could be ways that we might be able to get some of these services we need that are hard, it's hard to get for a little tiny community by ourselves, so. Anyway,
One of the suggestions that I had made, so since joining GP Executive Committee, we've met a few times, and that was one of the suggestions that I had made is to have GP be able to be in a position to provide some joint services for smaller municipalities that not necessarily need a full-time planner or a full-time sheriff around or things like that. So GP is also keeping that in consideration.
so it sounds like it's a consensus to move forward, so I think it makes sense, Vika, for you to contact Brian. I think the Long Island Select Board was gonna kind of make a formal decision tonight too, so. If you wanna follow up with him, I think and then I think, as I said in the memo, once we nail down a date, then we would probably try to get a facilitator that can just help keep the meeting running so people can participate. And we've had offers from the Island Institute, and we could probably get somebody from GP. So I think we can do that once we know when it's gonna be.
Is it safe to assume that when I email Brian that we're trying to settle on a date between their town meeting and our town meeting? So it would basically give us a 3-week window in May.
Well, actually, John said even the week before their town meeting, so like anywhere from the end of April. We have, I think we don't have quite as much at the very end of April. May is pretty busy for us, and so he didn't, he said. I don't know how long it takes to pull these things off, because really it's all the same people and we just either do it or we don't,
It's just the availability, yeah. And so it sounds like EMS, Select Board, Finance, Island Fellow.
I think the schools,
Yeah.
and it wouldn't, again, have to be the whole school committee, and it might be just Aaron, but some representatives from those entities, and so. And Janice Avignon, who's the head of their comp plan implementation committee, and they tied their comp plan to their capital planning, which was interesting. So they basically require that the capital planning includes sort of the recommendations or consider the recommendations in the comp plan, which I thought was interesting. But she had some specific things in mind, and I can just have her send an email to you.
Okay.
I think the date is the key thing, and then the format we can kind of work out. So, all right.
Great.
Yeah.
Very important. And had been in contact with someone over there, and have been wanting to go over to visit and to really see their station and a few other things. And Vika was concerned if I went, I would be acting as a select board person, so, which is fine. But I really would like to head over there at some point. I just need to understand how I can do that, or do I wait until after this meeting?
Yeah, I would wait until after this meeting. I think I've been there in a professional capacity or in a capacity as part of the town, but for some particular, event. I think if you are kind of interested in the town, functioning and all that, it should be something where at least the board knows you're going and,
Yep.
and I think somebody like Janice would be quite willing to kind of give you the lowdown. So anyway, I think we can cover that. I think, yeah, we'll see where this goes. I think sort of my original thinking was, let's have this big powwow, but I think starting small and seeing where it goes. We both have capacity challenges, even to make a meeting.
Yep.
All right, so let's move on to other business. And does anybody have anything they want to bring up on their other business? And I guess, maybe I'll bring this up under other business because I have a few communications. So just to bring everybody up to speed. So with a lot of help from GEI and our Island Institute, the fellows, we submitted a grant application to the Maine Public Working Waterfront Infrastructure Grant Program. And we won't hear about that till sometime in the middle of the summer. But then the follow-up for that was when I contacted the congressional offices, sort of to see if it was a good time for the fire department to apply for the public safety building. They basically, basically the message I got back from them is there really needed to be more of a community buy-in, like community outreach and an indication that they've run into a problem, they explained, where a couple of these projects have been funded and the community is not contingent on sort of the community providing the balance of the funding, and they're not willing to do that. And so they really don't want that to happen. And that I knew about the one in Freiburg, but these are more recent awards where very small towns have gotten multiple millions of dollars, but they need to come up with the extra 1 million, and the towns are balking. Townspeople are balking. So anyway, they asked what we had done for, public meetings, and we really haven't done a lot. It was not with the current proposals, so I think that's next on the plate. But because we had received funding in fiscal year 25, but then the budget never got approved, we never got the money. So both offices, I talked to King and Collins' office, they both recommended we resubmit, because we kind of have a canned thing already since we've been working on it.
With a stone pier?
So we submitted for the stone pier for fiscal year 27. Now we can see what's happening down there, and they're not even getting close to passing a budget, so don't hold your breath. But, I mean, it was interesting that Collins' office was like, yeah, you should resubmit because, we funded you once and you didn't get, or we selected you. So I'm just giving you that. I don't put a lot of stock in those because I think they're very chancy. And even though we got selected, we didn't get any money. We got $2.2 million, but we didn't get it. So that's an update from them. But I think that will be the last time we will submit on the Stone Pier project, and it would be some other infrastructure project like the public safety building. Then the town of Long Island, Janice, who is their the town of Long Island approached me about submitting a joint grant. Right now, we have a joint grant doing this wildfire project. Janice and I do similar things in the community, and she was suggesting getting a human to submitting a grant to share a person that would do basically like planning and project management for town related projects. And I think that's a good idea. And so it would be either a person or a firm that we would split the services, and the grants are 2 years and it's up to $75,000 per year if we do it together. So I think that is a good suggestion, but I wanted to check in with the board about that. One of the things we hope that the AmeriCorps program will continue, because these GP-COG fellows have been a huge benefit, and Loren as an Island Institute fellow. I don't know, the GP-COG folks want to continue the program, they're just not sure if AmeriCorps is going to continue. So anyway, I think this could be a good backup plan, and I don't think even if we had Loren, a GP-COG fellow, and another person to help, I don't think it would be a problem. So I don't know what people's thoughts are. Deacon, we haven't really talked much about this, but are you on board with that idea? Yeah. So it could be somebody that could help code enforcement, for example, which might be a good thing.
Any additional bodies at limited costs is a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Oh,
So there would be,
Good.
there's no match required right now with that grant. It's a reimbursement or a partial reimbursement as you go along, but other than that, there's no, we don't have to come up with half of it or anything. So anyway, we'll pursue that. I'll keep you in the loop on that.
For you labor.
And then the last thing was, in terms of additional grants, there's the grant that we have right now for the Stone Pier, there's another offering open. And because they just did these peer grants, they are not allowing those to be submitted, but so it's a main infrastructure adaptation grant. And I think we might be able to apply for the differential on the South Shore Drive. So Vika and I have a meeting with them on Monday, and we'll find out the details on that, because I don't know if the fact that we have FEMA money might disqualify us, but we'll find out there's a multiple of things I can think of that we could apply for that grant. And both this one and the previous one, these are one shot, no money that the state received, and they're not gonna happen again. And like, for example, it's up to $3 million per grantee. So some people are gonna get some big chunks of change. So I think we should pursue we did the other one, I think we should pursue this one, because we're just competing with the state, other towns. So, I'll keep you in the loop, but I think deciding what to apply for, once we have more information, I may be back for some thoughts on that. So, and I hope it's the last of the grants, though, for a while, but,
Wow, big, that's big, thank you.
Well, I mean, the state is in a position right now where they are really trying to allocate this money in case the administration changes and they could change how the money's used, so they're trying to get it out the door for resiliency related projects while they can. I don't mind. So that's all I have under other business. So next is communications, and Vika, did you have any communications?
I have a few, yes. One communication I received is from Eric Norcross. He is one of the tenants that moved into the Sika project. He emailed me asking for permission to film a scene at the transfer station. He had asked the transfer station attendant, and they directed him to me. And so the nature of this project is low-key, non-invasive to everyday life. The scene would be comprised of 2 actors with him filming and possibly a friend from lawn to help. It would take no more than an hour to get the shots. And so I'm bringing it to the select board to ask your permission to see what your thoughts are about that, because
What's the?
What's
purpose of this?
the script?
Is it gonna be Hollywood or?
Well, you've seen his other movie.
that's the detail that I received. I said that I would communicate with you to ask, but I'm happy to elaborate on more details about what it would entail.
I mean, I think we have to find out whether it's something that's gonna represent the town well, basically, that would be my concern.
Yeah, or the reverse is like, we do not want to authorize something that is a
Right.
poor reflection on the community.
Yeah. So, I think a little more information would be helpful.
And, I think that's the answer.
I would agree. I would concur.
What do you call it? Proposal.
I think in this case, what I'll do, if you're okay with it, I don't see that it warrants an agenda item for anything, but I will follow up with questions, get the answer. Once I get that answer, I'll reach out to you and then get your feedback on it, and if you're all on board, he can move forward. If you're not, then that's the answer, so.
An expose, we don't need an expose.
But if you look at his body of work, I'm not worried about it, but I think absolutely we need to make sure it's.
Okay.
Good.
The next communication is, so I recently had sent out a mass email to every person listed on the state website as an assessor, every person on the state website listed as an auditor, every person on the state website, assessor, auditor, interest for reevaluation services, because we had the reeval RFP posted for 2 months with no bites, and so that has since expired, and then we have had nobody interested in assessor, so I just blasted anybody on the town website. We have received 2 interests for assessors. I am setting up just kind of brief conversation with one of them next week. One of them, they're not a licensed assessor, they're just going through the process with no background in municipal work, which I think that would just be throwing that poor person starting out with their assessing career to the wolves coming to work here, but I'll follow up with any interest as it comes. The next communication is FEMA. We did get a notification. I had submitted an extension for the current projects, we have been approved, to February of 2027. So we have between now and then to figure out what we're gonna do with these projects. Extensions can and most likely do continue. They just need a valid reason why your extension is needed. So all of our extensions have been approved. I've been in contact with Chris Mayo. I had submitted due to recommendation from, so Chris Mayo is the director of the Marine Port Authority for the state of Maine. So anything marine infrastructure related on the water, he's the go-to guy. I, through his recommendation, through a conversation that we had with them and with Coastal Waters input and support, we submitted a ship grant. I did get communication from him that he has expedited it because I worded it that it was an emergency basis for some infrastructure at the Stone Pier, which Coastal Waters was proposing to put money aside to recommend. But because of some damage that it received this winter, we used it as, you know, we would like to get this work done prior to the summer, prior to those areas being more heavily used, and we can't do that because we don't have town meeting until June and we can't allocate the funds until July. So he did let me know that there is a really strong chance that by the end of the week, we should know and be approved for $75,000 for that. So if it happens, then I'll follow up with that, but that's good news.
Great.
And then the last communication, which it came to Carol, you can elaborate on that, was from Jeff Putnam relative to, he expressed some strong opinion about, the select board wanting to, or putting it back on the agenda for the video surveillance that had been discussed, that was tabled back in, the beginning of the winter, shortly after the holidays. And so he would like for it to be back on the agenda and for the select board to discuss that particular matter,
Yeah, so I think we both got the email? Is
Yes.
that what happened? Okay, so, and Jeff asked to be on the agenda for tonight's meeting, but I got it after we had already finalized the agenda. And so I offered the following meeting, which will be April 15th. The logistics might be a little challenging for him because he has another meeting on the mainland, but he thinks he can make the 6:30. I offered that if he wants to push it towards the next future meeting, that's fine. I don't think we're gonna, you know, we won't be doing anything actively on the surveillance, you know, installing surveillance before we have this as an agenda item. We did commit with him when, you know, way back, I think it was in the fall when this came up, that we would put it back on the agenda. I also think that, you know, we may need to do some additional, you know, research ourselves, so we're prepared to kind of, you know, answer the question. And so that's, you know, I think the earliest that we could be prepared for that would be April 15th. I didn't, you know, it was too late to go on the agenda, but I think it's better that we have a little time to get it together. And I think Jeff had some very specific thoughts about what the board should or shouldn't do relative to surveillance, and so I think I can share that with you, but I think what I would suggest is that we have, if Vika has time, if not, maybe one of us can do it, but I think we should understand, you know, whether Maine Municipal has sort of any recommended policy about video surveillance on public facilities. So that we, you know, I don't think we necessarily have to go to our attorney to find out, but I think finding out if there's sort of, I gotta believe there's guidance. I know a lot of communities do it. And I think Jeff has some legitimate concerns. I don't have a problem with that either, but it would be good to kind of at least know what other towns are doing. And I think in fairness to the community, it needs to be on the agenda and posted so they have a chance to, you know, other people may, as far as I know, this is the only individual that we've heard from, but we have heard quite a bit from people about the vandalism of, you know, stealing the signs and vandalism of property. So I want to give, you know, all parties a chance to kind of offer their thoughts on it if we put it on the agenda. But it could take some time. I think in fairness to people, we might have to allocate a half an hour or something for it.
I think it's a good opportunity for public engagement. I think there's a lot of misinformation about what the town is looking at doing and feeling that I think that there are some solutions by doing some outreach and public engagement with some of the people that are misinformed. And I think that would be a pretty positive direction as well. So I like the idea of focusing more on community engagement than video surveillance.
Okay, well, I think that's sort of that would be the agenda item would be to discuss,
Yep.
And I think the objective is to minimize the loss of signage and to minimize or to reduce the vandalism, which was pretty significant in a couple of our properties. So, town-owned properties, and we don't have law enforcement personnel to kind of back us up on this. So that's the challenge. So, anyway, I think I just wanted to let you know, and we'll put it on either next agenda if that works for Jeff. I feel like we got to defer it to him. He asked for it, and if he wants to move it into the following meeting, then we'll do it then. And just so I know, there is no video surveillance in operation anywhere on our island by the town.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct, and this is stemmed to me bringing it to the board, asking basically your permission to put some up at Chandler's, because there's been so much damage to the property and destruction, and the response was from that, and then the board tabled it. One other communication that I have that is related to the kind of the problem that was at hand that caused this discussion in the first place is I for a separate matter, had communications and reached out to Chris Mayo to get a better understanding of who we'll communicate with when it comes to Chandler's Dock. Chandler's Dock is a state-owned facility. And there had been questions raised to me about who manages it and what the authority is about how it's used or misused. And so I reached out to him this week because it was shared to me and photos shown, and I don't know if any of you have seen it, but Chandler's received significant, really disturbing, vulgar vandalism over the weekend inside the Chandler's shed, with some inappropriate spray paint language that was written about in individual. And so because that's not town property, I reached out to Chris to see who do we ask for permission, because I would like to have our public works cover that up as soon as possible. And so we did receive permission to do that. So Public Works is going to prioritize to try to cover that up. And then did get confirmation that with any issues that the municipalities receives in terms of complaints on or around Chandler's Dock, we do have the authority to police that area, so.
It's been covered up,
Okay,
The graffiti.
the graffiti.
okay, good. Then they work really fast.
They did it, I think, promptly.
Because it was on Monday is when I sent the email, Tuesday is when I received the communication back, so.
But it should be repainted, the whole.
Right now, my concern was trying to cover up
Cover
the inappropriate language that was spray painted and making sure that when I authorize the Public Works to do it, that I have the authority to do so. And so we did receive that, and then covering that up will be the first step, and then if it needs to be repainted, I mean, I think the one on Cousins Island probably needs to be repainted far more than this
They
one,
both-
but that's something that we can discuss with them for sure.
Community service hours.
And that's all I have for communications.
And anybody else with communications? So I did get a call today from the Maine Forest Service who wanted to know if we were interested in them they have sort of a portable, chipper, similar to what we used for the wildfire project last year. And they were offering to bring it out to Shabig for a day or a weekend and do kind of homeowner chipping, kind of moving around the island. And it's partly they do it as kind of a community outreach and kind of it's a community engagement thing. It doesn't cost us anything. We would have to maybe pay the barging fee. And I said I'd bring it up to the select board. And I think they're talking sort of in the spring months, that's, early summer, spring, like May, June, because that's when most people are doing their brush removal. And, so anyway, I said I'd let you know, and I can also ask the climate action team. I would guess that, they might be willing to use E-tip funds to pay for the barging. So I'm just throwing it out there and we can, I'll bring you up to date on it if it starts to get legs, but.
My recommendation would be to maybe have, our GP intern Addison take on that task. And have it be aligned with when CMP is doing the tree cutting, because if you recall, they are going to be chipping a lot, that there is gonna be some material that's gonna be left on people's properties.
Right.
And so that might be an opportunity to have this service offset that difference.
My thoughts exactly. And by the way, people who haven't been over, so on, the Cousins Island Road right now, I almost missed the boat today because they're cutting trees. They've hardly made it up the road from the corner of Wharf Road, but they're cutting a lot of trees. And so I was sort of surprised that we hadn't been alerted that that might be I timed it. I think it's about 5 minutes between lights. So we do have to allow a little extra time.
Yeah, I'm surprised that we didn't get a notice of that like we did about the bridge.
So, but anyway, I think they like Shabby, Maine Forest Service, so it's helpful.
How much can they really chip if they're here for a day?
They do quite a bit, but
They
they
can?
move around, it's brush, they're not trying to chip logs. They
Right.
wanna chip like the kind of stuff you and I would go out and cut, not,
Well,
not
don't
what-
include me in that. I'm doing whole streets.
Well, the key thing is like, last year when they were out, I mean, it's a great service, but what was lacking, and that's not finding fault, because it was first time and a lot of things to learn and stuff, was maybe having a fellow or somebody really coordinate it. Because we have to do an outreach to the property owners and
Right,
identify.
that would be totally additive.
The whole-
Yeah,
Right.
and Madison, one of the things that is on his bucket list is to follow up about what CMP is gonna be doing and do an outreach when it gets closer to when it's happening, so the community and residents are more aware of it. Because to my knowledge, CMP is not communicating about any of this. The only reason I found out about it was because Lenny, who works on Island, directly reached out to me and said, FYI, this is gonna be happening. And so it would be nice to make sure that everyone is aware of it. And then some people get really territorial about things on their property. And so them understanding that CMP has a 9-foot jurisdiction that they could take down whatever they want if it's impacting the power lines is important for those residents to know.
Well, and they're cutting some really big
Big
trees
trees.
right now. I
Yeah.
was shocked.
Yeah.
In a way, it could be
And
quite a
they're-
benefit to a property owner.
Right,
If you drive around the island, there are a lot of trees that are already marked
Yeah.
on Shabik. Anything you see that has little pink tags. Where the lines are, where it's the 3 lines, there is a significant amount that's gonna be coming down on Shabik that they've already started marking, so.
And I just want to add, when the Maine Forest Service was out here and did that workshop, made a major impact on how I see the trees around our house.
Mhm.
And it's.
And that's really what they're hoping is people will
Yeah.
clear the brush from close to their structures and, they're just trying to encourage people to think about fire risk.
Doing a
Unlike
good
the
job. I
folks in
just need a truck.
California who know all about it. All right, so I think we'll move
Good one.
on
Thank
to approve the minutes for the March 4th meeting. So can I have a motion?
So move.
David moved, second. Earhart, I guess, doesn't matter. So David, Earhart, all in favor? Right,
Thank you, Chris.
yes, thanks, Chris. And then if you have some things you wanna place on a future agenda, let me know. I think we'll move right on to the executive session, which, somebody needs to make a motion and you should read the exact citation so that why we're doing that. So somebody want,
So we go into executive session pursuant to 1 MRSA 40568 personnel committee appointments.
great.
Second, David.
All in favor? Great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How's that rocket going over there? How's the